Obsession. Everybody I know that really does their thing. I have a lot of friends that are like that, and when I see the ones that really do it, they're junkies. They really are. I mean, their thing, it takes them over.
Before Quincy Jones passed away at 91 in November 2024, he did something extraordinary. He pulled back the curtain. He exposed the truth. And what he revealed about 1970s Hollywood, it's darker than you could ever imagine. 28 Grammy Awards. Producer of the best-selling album of all time. A legend who worked with everyone from Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. Here's what Quincy Jones saw behind the glittering facade of Hollywood's golden era. And trust me, this story will change how you see the entertainment industry forever. Because when Quincy Jones spoke, Hollywood trembled. Let's start with this. Quincy Delight Jones Jr. wasn't just a music producer. He was a revolutionary. Born on the south side of Chicago in 1933, his grandmother was an ex-slave from a Kentucky plantation. Think about that timeline. His grandmother, an actual slave. And Quincy Jones would go on to produce Thriller, the biggest album in human history. But the path? Brutal. At 10 years old, Quincy couldn't even eat in the same restaurant as white passengers when his family took a bus to Seattle. They had to walk across town to find a black home that would feed them. That was America in 1943. That was the world that shaped Quincy Jones. Gang-oriented Chicago gave way to segregated Seattle, and somewhere in that chaos, a young boy found music. It saved his life. He said it himself. Music was the difference between ending up dead or in jail. By his teens, Quincy was playing trumpet with legends. Count Basie, Dizzy Gillespie, Ray Charles. These weren't just jam sessions. These were masterclasses in survival. Because in 1950s America, being a black musician meant dealing with constant discrimination. Hotels that wouldn't let you stay with your white bandmates. Audiences that hurled slurs. An industry that saw your talent but refused to see your humanity. But Quincy, he had a strategy. He told journalist Gene Lees, "I never make a move or an advance in my career until I am ready and prepared for it. Every step calculated, every boundary crossed with precision." Because he knew one mistake, one moment of not being ready, and the door would slam shut forever. In 1961, he became the first black vice president at a major white-owned record label, Mercury Records. First. Think about that date. 1961. The civil rights movement was in full swing, and Quincy Jones was breaking barriers in boardrooms where black faces simply didn't exist. And then he set his sights on Hollywood. Here's where it gets dark. Really dark. In 1965, Quincy Jones walked into Universal Studios, dressed in his finest suit. He'd been called to score music for Gregory Peck's film, Mirage. This was his shot. His big Hollywood break. And you know what happened? The producer stopped in his tracks. Literally froze. Then walked back to the music supervisor and said, and I quote, "You didn't tell me Quincy Jones was a Negro." They didn't use black composers. Not for Hollywood films. Not in the 1960s. Not when Quincy Jones showed up. The unwritten rule? Eastern European names only. Bronislaw Kaper, Dmitri Tiomkin. 3-syllable surnames that sounded right to white executives. But Quincy Jones, that name was too black for Hollywood. And it got worse. Quincy described walking down the halls at Universal Studios and hearing white executives say, "Here comes a Schwarzer," a Yiddish slur equivalent to the N-word. They said it right to his face. right in the halls of one of America's biggest film studios. This wasn't the Deep South. This was Hollywood, the supposed land of dreams and progressive values. But let me tell you something Sidney Poitier once said, something that Quincy Jones echoed in his own words. He said Hollywood was not a courageous place, nor was it a hospitable place for one perceived as different, as a trespasser prowling too close to some private domain. A trespasser. That's how they saw black talent in 1970s Hollywood. Not as artists, not as innovators, as trespassers in white territory. Quincy fought through it. Henry Mancini defended him. Fellow black composer Benny Carter helped him get work on television shows. Slowly, painfully, Quincy Jones carved out space. He scored In Cold Blood with Truman Capote. He worked with Sidney Poitier on multiple films. He became the first black composer nominated for an Academy Award. But every single win came at a cost. Now here's where Quincy's revelations really explode. Because racism wasn't the only darkness lurking in 1970s Hollywood. There was something else. Something insidious that destroyed careers, bodies, and souls. Drugs. Everywhere. All the time. In his explosive 2018 interview with Vulture, an interview so wild, so unfiltered that it went viral instantly, Quincy pulled no punches. He talked about the party culture, the excess, the substance abuse that Hollywood pretended didn't exist while privately everyone knew. Let's talk about Ray Charles, Quincy's close friend, a musical genius, and a heroin addict for 30 years. Quincy described watching Ray Charles, one of the greatest musicians in American history, injecting heroin into his testicles because his veins were so destroyed. He had a guy do it, Quincy said. It was horrible. 30 years of heroin. That's what it took for the police to finally tell Ray Charles he couldn't get his license to play clubs unless he stopped. Not because the industry cared about his health, because they needed him functional enough to perform. The 1970s disco scene. Cocaine and Quaaludes everywhere. They called Quaaludes disco biscuits because they were so common at clubs. Massive quantities of drugs were ingested at discotheques, according to cultural historians. The party never stopped. And Hollywood celebrities? Right in the middle of it. Jack Nicholson's house, infamous for round-the-clock parties with drugs hidden in shaving cream containers. When police arrested Roman Polanski at Nicholson's home in 1977, they found hashish in the master bedroom. But according to biographers, that was just the tip of the iceberg. There was supposedly a two-tier drug system, upstairs drugs for the elite and downstairs drugs for everyone else. Frank Sinatra partied harder than almost anyone, according to Quincy. And Quincy learned from the best or the worst, depending on how you look at it. The entertainment industry normalized substance abuse. It was considered part of the creative process, part of the lifestyle. Fran Lebowitz, the writer, summed it up perfectly. We thought these things were good for you. Drugs, good for you, like orange juice. But the cost? Artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, all dead from drug use. The entire New York punk scene decimated by heroin. And in Hollywood? The studio culture of the Golden Age had already primed everyone for this. Elizabeth Taylor vividly remembered receiving pills that kept her awake for 15 to 20-hour shoots, then pills to make her sleep, then pills to wake her up again. The entertainment industry didn't just enable addiction, it manufactured it. In his final years, Quincy Jones became brutally honest. Shockingly honest. At 84 years old, he sat down for interviews and just let it rip. No filter. No fear. Because what were they going to do? Cancel a legend? In that infamous 2018 Vulture interview, Quincy said things that made headlines worldwide. He called out Michael Jackson, the artist he helped create, for being greedy and stealing music. He said Jackson stole notes from Donna Summer's songs for Billie Jean. The notes don't lie, man. He was as Machiavellian as they come. He criticized Jackson's obsessive plastic surgery. I used to kill him about it, man. He'd always justify it and say it was because of some disease he had. Bullshit. But here's what really shocked people. Quincy revealed that Hollywood was rife with secrets that went beyond music rights and surgery. He talked about Marlon Brando's private life, about Richard Pryor, about connections between celebrities that the public never knew existed. The 1970s, Quincy explained, was a time when cocaine flowed so freely that people would, in his words confirmed by Pryor's widow, fuck a radiator and send it flowers in the morning. That's not hyperbole. That's the actual drug-addled reality of 1970s Hollywood. And then there was Elvis Presley. When asked if he'd ever worked with the king of rock and roll, Quincy's response was immediate and cutting. No, I wouldn't work with him. Why? He was a racist mother. I'm going to shut up now. Quincy explained that every time he saw Elvis, the singer was being coached by black songwriter Otis Blackwell on how to sing. Elvis built his entire career on black music while reportedly maintaining racist attitudes behind closed doors. The hypocrisy was staggering. But let's zoom out for a second. Because what Quincy Jones revealed wasn't just about individual bad actors, it was about systemic exploitation. A power structure designed to extract talent from black artists while denying them control, ownership, and respect. When Quincy tried to break into film scoring, the resistance wasn't just about personal racism. It was about maintaining a monopoly. White executives controlled who got hired. White composers got the prestige projects. Black musicians? They could play jazz, they could entertain at clubs, but scoring a major Hollywood film? That was reserved for their people. Even when Quincy finally broke through with The Color Purple in 1985, producing a film that would gross $143 million, Hollywood executives kept saying a black picture can only do $30 million. They were wrong. Massively wrong. But that doubt, that limitation placed on black creativity, was the default setting. And here's the thing about the 1970s specifically. It was the blaxploitation era. Hollywood suddenly realized black audiences had buying power, so they made films like Shaft and Foxy Brown, films that featured black actors and stories but were often produced, directed and controlled by white executives. The profits? They didn't flow back to black communities. The ownership stayed in white hands. Quincy Jones understood this. He fought it by building his own production company, Quincy Jones Entertainment, in the 1990s. He produced The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, launching Will Smith's career. He started Vibe magazine. He created platforms where black talent could thrive with black ownership. But in the 1970s, the barriers were still brutally high. So why did Quincy Jones decide to reveal all of this? Why pull back the curtain after decades in the industry? Because silence never changed anything. Because the entertainment industry built its fortune on the backs of black artists while erasing their contributions from history. Because Quincy Jones watched friends destroy themselves with drugs while executives looked the other way. Because he saw talent crushed by discrimination year after year, decade after decade. In his autobiography and interviews, Quincy kept coming back to one phrase that he shared with Ray Charles. "Not one drop of my self-worth depends on your acceptance of me." That was the armor. That was how black artists survived in a racist industry, by knowing their value even when everyone around them tried to diminish it. And in his final years, Quincy wanted the world to know the truth. Not a sanitized Hollywood version. The real truth. The darkness behind the glamour. The racism behind the awards shows. The exploitation behind the hit records. His daughter, Rashida Jones, who co-directed the Netflix documentary Quincy, said she learned about her father's need to survive through music while making the film. Music wasn't just Quincy's career. It was his survival mechanism, his way of fighting back against a world determined to break him. And break him, it tried. In 1974, Quincy developed a life-threatening brain aneurysm. The stress, the overwork, the constant battles. His family literally started planning his memorial service because they thought he was dying. But Quincy survived, and he kept fighting. Quincy Jones died on November 3rd, 2024, at 91 years old. The cause was pancreatic cancer. President Biden called him a great unifier who believed deeply in the healing power of music. Barack Obama praised him for paving the way for generations of black executives to leave their mark on the entertainment business. But here's what I want you to remember from this video. Quincy Jones didn't just make great music. He survived. He revealed. He fought a system designed to exclude him and won anyway. The dark side of 1970s Hollywood, the racism, the drugs, the exploitation, the hypocrisy. He saw it all. He lived through it, and before he died, he made damn sure the world knew the truth. Because that's what legends do. They don't just create art, they change the world. And then they tell the story that others were too afraid to tell. Quincy Jones was more than a music producer. He was a truth teller, a barrier breaker, a survivor who turned pain into power and silence into sound. And his revelations about 1970s Hollywood, they're a reminder that behind every glittering award show, every hit record, every Hollywood blockbuster, there are stories of struggle that deserve to be told. Thank you for watching. If this video opened your eyes to the real history of Hollywood, hit that subscribe button. Share this story. Because Quincy Jones's legacy isn't just in the music he created, it's in the truth he revealed. Rest in power, Quincy Jones. Your voice still echoes.